A truce so delicate that we might be best speaking only in whispers. Over the last few days, the economic and trade consensus reached between China and the United States in Kuala Lumpur last month have started to take effect. The U.S. has removed the 10% so-called fentanyl tariff and suspended for 1 year the 24% reciprocal tariffs, quote-unquote, on Chinese goods, and China has reciprocated by adjusting its tariff countermeasures. Both sides have also suspended port fees against each other for 1 year. The U.S. has suspended the so-called affiliate rule targeting companies which are more than 50% owned by a Chinese company on the entity list. In return, China has paused some export control measures around batteries and rare earth. And the list goes on just a little bit longer. Welcome news for sure, not only for China and the United States, but for the world. But more importantly, will the truce hold? Do we need to manage our expectations and how to keep things on the right track? Welcome to this edition of The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Liu Xin. I'm pleased to be joined by Mr. Zhou Mi, Deputy Director of the Institute of American and Oceania Study at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and here in the studio by Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. From the Chinese side, I understand from the readout of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 4 big chunks of what both sides agreed. First of all, it has to do with the removal or suspension of two-way tariffs, and then suspending the affiliate rule for rare earth access. The third part would be about suspending two-way port fees, and finally some other issues including anti-drug cooperation, expanding agricultural trade, TikTok, etc., etc. Now, right after the Busan meeting between presidents of the two sides, China's Ministry of Commerce gave out the readout of the details, saying China stands ready to work with the U.S. to jointly uphold and implement the important consensus reached by the two presidents. First of all, let me go to Mr. Zhou. How significant is this consensus between the two countries?
Well, I think it's very important for these two countries to have some kind of consensus, because not only because these two countries are super large in the economy and also in the global trade, but also because that just before these meetings, there are some escalation about the relations and becoming more tensions. Both countries are trying to impose more restrictions, like you mentioned about the port fee, which is a very big change about the logistics and improve the trade in a much more unprecedented way of the cost. And also about the export control, I think that the affiliated rules, or we call it the penetration rules, is a really different ways of doing the export control. It has a lot of influence about the structure of the corporations and also trying to give the much wider range of the impacts on the global trade and the cooperation. So for the consensus by these two countries, I really gave the market some release about the possible escalation about the relations of the trade disputes between these two countries. I think it's also giving us some time to think about what we can do by both governments. Maybe we can do more to improve the trust and also trying to have a better release on the market confidence. I think that is very important.
Well, from the American perspective, the list seems to be a bit longer. The White House published a so-called fact sheet on November the 1st, where they claim to have extracted 10 concessions from China while only giving China 4 in return. Of course, claiming another win for the Trump administration. Mr. Zhou, Professor Zhou, what's the biggest takeaway for you for the American side? Professor Liu, sorry. Let me go to Professor Liu here in the studio. What do you think is the biggest takeaway for the American side from President Trump's perspective?
Well, Trump has a very clear goal that he has to win the midterm election by the Republicans. So therefore, he would ramp up every effort to achieve that goal by winning his constitution base So this is very clear, and by which he has been pressurizing the whole world to come up into short-term gains to the United States, and there's no exception for the China approach. So the U.S. would see it's really a triumph because the temporary relief of the rare earth supply is the key. And as for the fentanyl, actually that has nothing to do with China, based on the traffic report by the United States. So it is really much of the last mile border control that's really created such a disaster within the United States. But he just used this as an excuse to levy twice, each by 10% of the tariff on China. So he knows that he does not really has a ground, and his proposal may not really pass the Congress anyway. So he just used this as a bluff. Now, by remaining the 10% is something that is really a forced pressure on China, and now particularly now when his really big constituency coming from the farmers, so he declares that okay, that's something of a good news I brought for you, and now he also creates a sort of a relief for the federal government, also state government, so that they can really be able to be relieved of further subsidies to those farmers who suffer from such a trade war with China. So now the issue is whether there's going to be a practical delivery. That's something beyond his consideration at the moment, and so much of the details and particularly the implementation procedure will have to be ironed out. So therefore, that's his typical communication with the world, and also more importantly with his current constituencies.
Well, let's start with soybeans as one of two main points of discrepancy, I would say, between the Chinese version of what was achieved and the American version. It is important, I think it is important, because then we have to understand exactly what we're implementing. Now, the White House claimed China will purchase at least 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans during the last 2 months of 2025, and also purchase at least 25 million metric tons of U.S. Soybeans in each of 2026 to 2028. Note that big question mark at the background, because if you read the Chinese official readout, you're not seeing these numbers. China only made a vague mention of expanding agricultural product trade, but no official numbers are given. China did say it will expand agricultural trade with the United States. Mr. Zhou, let me go to you first. What do you make of this difference? Do you think China has actually agreed to these numbers, or just hasn't made it public? Or has the Trump administration, perhaps wanting flashy headlines, inserted these numbers themselves?
Well, let me make it clear that before the tariffs of the first term of Donald Trump, we imported a lot of soybeans from the United States. And that is because that both sides have the complementary advantages. We have the market and they have the supply of the soybean very competitive prices and also the sustainable supply. So it is very natural for the people in the United States who are having the farming on the soybeans. They really depend on the export to China. I think it's a natural thing that we have observed in the past several years. We see the soybeans commissions are really working very hard to stop or prevent the dispute between our two countries. And in the past several years, we have seen so many fluctuations about tariffs and the unstable supply chain from the United States side. So we imported more soybeans from other countries. That is based on the market rules. So in this regard, I would say that any decision the Chinese government is doing is not trying to decide what the market should do. So we have to respect the market decision and also the enterprises. We are not going to manipulate their decisions. So I think that is natural for U.S. to try to sell more soybeans to Chinese market. And we also want more soybeans. But
so where do the numbers come from? Where do the numbers come from?
Yeah.
Did the American side just make them up? Did they? Is that something that's nice to have, wishful thinking, or did they actually agree and China doesn't want to publicize that?
In my understanding, that they want to offer some numbers to the public, to the people. They will have some confidence on what kind of extent they can export to China. So that has to be decided by the market, by the two sides.
Professor Liu.
Without enough,
Professor Liu, what is your take on this issue?
Yeah, so I think this is a really typical American way that they need to come up with a quantitative number to be more convincing to all the stakeholders. But I do not think this number, based on the previous year's purchase, even if it's during peak time, is really realistic. But I mean, simply by market rules, China can really accommodate more. And also China can really offer some symbolic gestures in purchasing and to really to create a goodwill. But in the meanwhile, I do agree with Mr. Zhou that it is really depending on the market forces, because China has a number of buyers and they have to make their own business calculation instead of comply with the political rhetorics by the U.S. side, simply because they have to make the deal pay off. And right now, another fact is that you see some of the South American countries, they are also seeing the Chinese big market and taking advantage of the political rift between China and the United States. They have already beefed up their planting scale, and farmers and the entire supply chain is also being recalibrated to supply to the Chinese market. So simply, by ripping off a number of contracts or potential expectation will not really be a responsible fashion for big companies to engage. So therefore, whether these numbers can be achievable, I think it's because so far we do not have a specific agreement like the phase one during his first term between China and the United States. And now it is something of expectation. But
so you mentioned something very interesting, Professor Liu. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
We do not have something black and white, ink on white paper, as we say in Chinese, that you put your names on and you put the official stamp.
Yeah, it's not inked and sealed.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
What do we have?
Well, right now it's a consensus.
Is there anything written down?
Well, I think there have been something written down, but it has not been inked and sealed. And now much will be left for the further discussion between the two sides, and particularly the responsible departments like the USTR versus Chinese MOFCOM, et cetera, and then they will have to go back, and particularly on the purchase side, to consult, whether the companies like COFCO within China will be able to afford, such sort of quantity, and what will be the market base. So therefore, the market mechanisms will have to be respected, and that's something that has been again and again taught by the United States to China. So we need to follow market rules.
Exactly. Yeah. How funny things can change. But on the other hand, China is serious about its commitment to buy more U.S. agricultural produce. And this latest, I noticed, effective Monday, China reinstated the soybean import qualifications for 3 U.S. companies. Mr. Zhou, are the wheels in motion for China to buy more soybeans from the United States?
Well, I mean, from the quality, from the prices, and also the sustainability, I think that the U.S. companies are competitive. So I believe that if we can have more expectation, they can prepare for the future seasons of the harvest or the plantation, and that is definitely good for both of us. So we need some confidence, and the messages are important for them to manage this kind of procedures.
Yeah, on the other hand, also the removal of the port fees within the United States is also there to give more confidence and reduce the cost for logistic movement. So that I think definitely China will be able to buy at both on the commercial consideration, also offer a symbolic gesture. But much needs to be ironed out during future negotiation or negotiations.
Okay. Let's turn to rare earth, which is another point in focus. Now, the White House announced, and China pretty much confirmed, that China will suspend the global implementation of the expansive new export controls on rare earth and related measures that announced on October the 9th. 2025, so basically last month. Now, the October 9th measures, I understand, cover super hard materials, lithium batteries, synthetic graphite, anode materials, equipment and raw materials related to rare earth, and 5 medium and heavy rare earth elements, including holmium. Mr. Zhou, what does the suspension mean here? I mean, the U.S. Suspending the affiliate rules in exchange for the suspension of October 9th measures.
Well, I think that is a kind of measurement that we are having some, understanding or common or similar consideration, like the United States. They have increased the consideration about the stock shares in all these companies. I think it's a very big expansion about the export control. So for China side, we have to do something to improve, the export control accordingly. But comparing with the different materials, they are having more control on the technology side. We are having more control on the material side. They are having different impact on the world. So for both of us, I think we have to try to consider about the supply chain resilience. That is not just for the military usage, but also for some of the civil usage. As you can find that Chinese government is trying to give some of these permits to many the civil use of this rare earth, trying to speed up the permit procedures. So in this regard, I think that China is trying to be more responsible in the global trade and make the market feel less painful when we're considering about some new measurements.
How exactly, Professor Liu, will this tit-for-tat relaxation impact American business?
And definitely no business will like to see uncertainties. And now there has been a lot of confusion and a lot of contingencies being prepared within the firms that engage on the bilateral trade. And now I think at least it's really a temporary truce for the coming year. And now they are still very much watchful with regard to what is going to happen during this entire process, because after all, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's really a delicate one that can only be dealt with a whisper at the moment. And so therefore the China plus one or U.S. plus one would be the right strategy that they normally approach. So further diversification of the market is still going on as a sort of a legitimate strategy for big companies. And now it's not only in terms of trade, but also in terms of investment, in terms of the third country engagement. And there's still a lot of uncertainties that's over there, particularly of the actual implementation of such a sort of quote-unquote agreement, and depending on future discussions. And also there can be some external shocks that may be able to further exert the negative impact on such a fragile, I should say, situation at the moment. But the good thing is that after all, we have really contained the escalation and also turned the situation into a managed competition.
Well, when it comes to access to rare earth, it has been going on for quite some time, at least since 2023, when China introduced a system, a mechanism to regulate the flow of rare earth. But here comes another point of confusion in between the Beijing and the White House, because after this round of trade negotiations, because the White House says China will issue general licenses valid for exports of rare earth, gallium, germanium, antimony, and graphite for the benefit of U.S. and users and their suppliers U.S. end users and their suppliers around the world. And the general license means the de facto removal of controls China imposed since 2023. Note the big question mark that we have put underneath this paragraph, because China actually did not mention any of this, especially the de facto removal of control imposed since 2023. Exactly, Mr. Zhou, what is the truth here? Does the latest agreement cover anything that China did back in 2023?
Yeah, personally, I would say that we are, like the Professor Liu has just mentioned, we haven't seen any written agreements by these two countries. So they are still in this process of trying to negotiate a better and also the written agreements. So in this progress, we are still in the process to prepare for that. But in my understanding, since the export control is not just made by the government, by some of these ministries, it is decided by the law. So it is a very, forced action for us to consider about these possibilities of the consideration about the national security or other issues. So we are not just trying to change the law. We have to do something according to our law requirement.
I do not think it's really justifies from the Chinese perspective to have a whole blanket removal of such sort of control based on two conditions, because China continue to maintain certain of the the blacklisted companies that we will not really deal with on whatever the conditions, so not to mention rare earths. And the other is that China maintains a firm stance that we are not there to supply some of the military use, so that's very clear. And also, there are also, these really identified ones, because rare earths is composed of a whole basket of many other materials inside. So this type of identification also indicates the fact that there is not really a whole blanket removal of such. And also that China will also hold the string and see what really come up from the U.S. side, because the trust is not there yet. So therefore, legitimately and also logically, we will not really have a full release of the bargaining chip, and also, in consideration of many other supplies that China can really deal with. So, there's domestic consumption, and there are many other buyers around the world aside from the U.S. firms. So this is a very typical and legitimate approach that China adopts.
On a side note, however, while China is implementing the consensus reached in Kuala Lumpur, it is actually, it has rolled out new measures related to rare earth. Just days earlier, before actually China announced the implementation of the Kuala Lumpur agreement, China announced that exports of items related to super hard materials, equipment and raw materials related to rare earth, 5 medium and heavy rare earth elements including holmium, lithium batteries, as well as synthetic graphite anode materials will not be permitted without approval. Mr. Zhou, does that sound like contradictory? On the one hand, it lifts certain restrictions it imposed in October this year, but on the other hand, it seems to add more restrictions to export.
Well, in my understanding, it's not just a contradiction. It is because that we are considering about the situation. The situation is changing. So we are considering about this decision based on the fact and also the research, and also some of the feelings we are seeing in the world. If the world is forced us to take more measures to protect ourselves, I think that we will introduce more practices and measurements to defend ourselves. So in this regard, I think that is also, as I mentioned, to follow our law requirement.
So these latest measures, Professor Liu, which were rolled out early November after the Busan meeting between the two presidents, are they specially targeting any certain country? How do you see the relationship between this latest development versus what was agreed to and will be implemented since Kuala Lumpur?
No, there has been 5 rounds of talks before the Busan summit. I think now this one is more decisive because it can really rewrite the previous agreements. But the issue is that, as we talked before, it is not really inked at the moment. So therefore, based on such a sort of consensus, how can really both sides work out something that is firm and verifiable and also the auditable during the implementation process? So that's something that people still have a lot more comprehension over with. But overall, I would see that at least with certain the identified terms, we are able to compartmentalize some of the disputes that's still going on, and also by further settling the dust over the tariff issue is something that's a positive energy injected to the marketplace. And also the removal of the port fees is really a very realistic one, and both sides have felt the pain, but now realizing that interdependence is not really to be completely severed. So I think now at least we are positive to see that we are on the right track. How far we can, how many miles we can drive? So that's something.
That's a big question.
Yeah,
but I want to ask for each and every one of you, Professor Liu. I stay with you for this last question. What must be done to keep things on the right track? 1 minute, please.
I think one is to make a realistic assessment of the interdependence of each other. So politicization and even weaponization of trade is totally wrong against the basic market rules, against the people's desire, and also against the global supply chain. And then we really need to manage certain type of issues, achieve even step by step into sectorial agreements so that we can really gradually recalibrate such a situation. So that's something both political and economically desired.
Professor, Mr. Zhou, how can we keep the truce in shape? However delicate it is, right now we have, it sounds like a gentleman's agreement. If we stay gentlemen, how do we stay gentlemen?
Yeah, like if we have sent some signals, we have to make it clear, and we will not just change the directions very frequently. And the second, I think that we need to respect the market, to hear from the market what the enterprises and the stakeholders really want from us. And the third one, I think that we may need to also to return our principles for the multilateral system and also respect the other stakeholders like the EU or other countries, what they really want from us. So this is definitely the basis for us to try to have a better understanding about each other and give the market more confidence.
Hopefully we get wiser as we go further in interacting with each other. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to Mr. Zhou Mi, Deputy Director of the Institute of American and Oceania Study at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics.